Thanks for being so patient with me, guys. This is part 3 of the Roubo bench, and what I'm doing here is essentially building the base. I'm starting off here by cutting down some 2x4s. These are not reclaimed. I had to buy these at the store. I couldn't get reclaimed lumber quickly enough to finish this, although that's ironic given how long it's taken me to put this video out. This portion that you're seeing right here is in fact reclaimed. That is a 2x8 or a 2x10 that I was salvaged out of a demo that was happening at the office. And what I'm doing is cutting it to width. I'm taking off the sides, getting rid of the round overs so that I can have some clean edges on the sides. I'm doing the same with the 2x4s that I cut to length earlier. There's only one part of this video that I did in quick motion, and that happens later on, but this part I wanted to show in real speed. I wanted to show you how slowly you actually have to go when you're cutting full height of a 2x4. I didn't want to speed it up and give anyone the wrong impression. Here we're just planing down these portions here, these leg portions. Actually, that's a cross member there, and the reason I'm planing it is because I want to get them all down to a consistent thickness, and I also want to give myself the best glue surface because I'm going to be laminating these together to create the legs. And that's what you can see me doing here, is putting down a ton of glue, spreading it out nicely, and then I'm going to put a couple of quick clamps on the edges so that I can try to get them as close to together as possible. So you see that I'm doing that right there. And then when I clamp them, they'll move far less. So it's a nice little trick that I picked up. I don't know where. Maybe I invented it. Who knows? I'm a genius about clamps sometimes. And then I had to be pretty sparing with the amount of clamps that I use because I don't have that many, and I wanted to clamp them all up at the same time. But if I had to go back and do it all over again, I would have just done more clamps and just taken my time with that glue up. Here I'm just trimming off the ends. These legs and portions were all made longer so that I could cut them off square. And what we're doing here is we are making a jig. So this is just going to be a simple right angle clamp on jig. And what I'll be able to do then is to push a Forstner bit through the hole that I created in this jig, so that I can hog out most of the material when I go out to clean it up with the chisel. I'm using the other side of the jig before I screw it in to mark a line, and it lets me know what my safe zone is for pre-drilling these holes. I always recommend pre-drilling holes, especially in plywood, but I haven't encountered a scenario where you don't need to pre-drill, so I recommend always doing that. And I'm just clamping these two portions together so that I can screw them together cleanly. Since this video, I've run out of the screws that I used here, which were just regular drywall screws, but they're Phillips head. And the ones that I most recently purchased, also 2-inch, but they're Robertson head, the square head ones. And I like those way better for driving screws. They don't round over or get all smashed when you use an impact driver too hard on them. They just go right in, super smooth. Not that I did that here, but just saying. Now what I'm doing here is simply laying out essentially the size of the mortise. I want it to be a specific size, and I think I want it to be 3 inches by 1 inch or 1.5 inches, something like that. So I just sort of pre-drilled, and I don't show it here, but I used a Forstner bit, an 1-inch Forstner bit, to drill out those 2 holes. And then I take it over to my scroll saw to cut out, I guess, the distance between. So this jig is super simple. It's just a right angle, two pieces of plywood screwed together, and then I clamp it onto the leg or whatever. I think this was the leg, yeah. And I just clamp it on clean. You see there that I use the head of my mallet as a spacer, so that I always know for every leg to use the space of the head of the mallet to distance it from the bottom of the leg. And I'm using my Forstner bit, as I mentioned earlier, to hog out that material to get rid of most of it, so that when I go to use the chisels later on, there isn't that much material to dig out, just to square up the corners. What you're seeing here is a quick little tip that I'm reiterating from John Heiss, and he essentially showed how to sharpen up a Forstner bit, and I'm doing that quick and dirty here. My Forstner bit was running kind of dull. There was a little bit of smoke to it, so I just took my file to the edge and just went in the same direction, only filing in one direction from back to front, not going the other way because the burr will be in the wrong direction. And that sharpened that up real nice, and the Forstner bit worked perfectly again. Now, if I was using some super expensive Freud bits or, whatever, White or whatever expensive brand, I probably would not be messing with them. But these are cheap Mastercraft Forstner bits, and I had nothing to lose, so there I went, and it worked out well. Here I'm marking out the mortise because all I did was hog out the material with the Forstner bit, and using that jig honestly was probably serious overkill and probably a waste of time, because I could have just marked out as I'm doing now and then just used the hand drill to bust out that material, which I did, but all to say, that was probably a big waste of time. This was more critical in making sure that I was marking out a correct mortise, and I use a razor blade to score the lines here. And then I line up my chisel with those pencil marks, and I go to town. So here we go with the fast motion, just because this would take forever otherwise, but I wanted to show the amount of work required to chisel out a single mortise. I'm only showing one, but there are 8 to be done just for the base. So that's a lot of work, and if I had to do this over again, which I kind of sort of do, because I was very ambitious with wanting to do this by hand, and the mortises are not all square, which means that the cross pieces that go into them aren't perfectly true and square, so they become twisted a little. So I have to go through all of this with a router jig, which I'll probably show maybe in a tiny little video. But for the sake of assuming that I was good at doing this, that's how you would have done it. And it takes a really long time by hand, especially when you're working with pine, which is soft and tends to crush unless your chisels are super sharp. So I would forewarn against doing it by hand unless you have really a desire to punish yourself. But what I'm doing here is I'm just cutting the tenons using my dado stack, and it was super quick. I just sort of measured out from the outside to the inside of the mortise, giving me approximately close to the distance. That way the mortise was the tenon was pretty close to where I needed it to be. And then I'll go back, and you gotta sort of finagle with it with the chisels to really bring it down to the exact size of the mortise, because you want this thing to be pretty darn tight. That's what it's all about. The first thing I do is I sort of chamfer the tenon so that it's easier to slip in and out, and I just did that real quick here. And then I started adjusting the mortise just a little bit. It always needed to be cleaned up constantly. There's some, even though I sharpened the heck out of these chisels, I got myself some water stones, and these things are sharp enough to shave with. Pine just is not super fun to do mortises with. But eventually, you get these super snug mortises, and I was very happy with it at the time. And individually, each one looks great, but when you put the whole base together, which I did, it didn't come out as square as I wanted it to. So that's also one of the reasons why it took me so long to get this video out. Thanks for watching. In the next video, you'll see everything.